I like doing this because I like seeing and hearing the result. It makes me feel like I've contributed.
I realized that everybody knows Paul. Because of all of the people that he's worked with, when he hears stuff on the radio, he's like, well, I know what they did that on. And so I think he just gets a charge out of that.
I hear things that were done with things that I created. And that makes me happy because that person is happy. That song is doing well and people like that song. And whatever minor part I had in that, I feel like it's part of the glue that holds it all together. And that's what charges me. When I see a smile on somebody's face when they go, oh.
And because he does this out of pure passion for building these products for creatives. It is not because he's thinking about how it's going to turn into some giant business. He does this because he has a passion for building this stuff, knowing that it's going to get used in creative.
I've made sacrifices to make sure that it sounded better and did what it was supposed to do instead of turning it into a machine that just generates cash.
And it's the same thing for me, because I didn't do this because I thought we could turn it into a giant business, although I hope it's a successful product. I did it because I really wanted to build something that I thought would be super useful in the context of doing creative stuff.
I don't want to lose that feeling because that's what keeps me going. I mean, at my age, I feel like I'm 20. I love this. I get up every day wanting to do this. I go to bed only because I have to, because I just love every aspect of it. And it's the charge I get from it. And all my customers are my friends. They all share those experiences with me. I go to visit these people and they show me what they're doing with my stuff. To me, it's just like, there you go. We have a 13,800 square foot factory in Goleta, which is a suburb of Santa Barbara.
We're building Pro Patches in Goleta. It's where the airport is in Santa Barbara.
We're on the exact approach runway of Santa Barbara Airport. Innovation is really recognizing a need for something and then being able to create something that fills that need. All this stuff originated, all the consoles, everything originated from listening to needs and fulfilling those needs.
It's easy to get distracted by the technical side of stuff. And the way that has manifested itself is it almost always occurs when I want to do something and what I want to do doesn't exist. Or I see something that I think could just be so much easier. So first thing I did in software, music related, is I made a way to organize the plugins drop down inside of Pro Tools to navigate that list. I don't think I was thinking about anything other than solving that problem at the time. That gave me a bunch of exposure to look at other things that I thought might be missing as well.
When you design something, you have to experiment around and you have to be able to hear those things. I designed an op amp some time ago, and I remember the company that made the op amps made them on ceramic and they wouldn't make prototypes. So I made this little kludge, I listened to it, I liked the way it sounded. I looked at it on a scope and I saw that it had a lot of third harmonic distortion in the low end, and then it tapered down and the high end was just crystal clear. And I just said, you know what? I like the way this sounds. I bought 5,000 of them before I even heard one that was done. Plugged it in and it worked. There are musical relationships that you have to understand when you're doing things. And you have to make sure that you use things that don't create harmonic distortion in an area that you don't want it.
What kind of distortion is that?
That's pretty broadband. My thing was listening to something, then looking at it, and then looking at the circuit, changing the circuit, seeing it change and hearing it change, and starting to correlate these things. It's almost like AI, you know, as you have all this information and you start correlating it. So when someone says, I would like to have a preamplifier that has third harmonic distortion, I would know how to do that. And that's what I started really enjoying, was having that ability to sense those things and identify what they are, and then translate that into a circuit and hearing those differences. Another exercise was comparing two mic preamps. You listen to one, then you listen to the other. Listen to the one. Now, if we had a pro patch, we could just go click, 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 but you always had to patch it. So there's always that gap.
The Pro Patch came from, as many ideas for products do, from a need inside of a studio. So I had a recording studio, I had a whole bunch of TT patch bays, and I would sit and look at them and wonder, why can they not be automated? And that's where the product came from, is just thinking through, okay, if we were gonna automate a patch bay, how would we go about doing it? And an interesting thing that we learned along the way of building this is that when first thinking about it, it was really just how do you automate the not having to plug the cables in and out. But once we built it and we started to play with it, what we realized is that when it's as easy as just dragging an object and piece of software and dropping it on a chain and having that work, it completely changes the way that you begin to think about all of your analog gear. You really think about it almost like you would in a DAW plugins. And the creative ability to use those things is just completely different than you would ever do if you were using a regular patch bay. Because at the moment you think, oh, I want to do this, like 2 seconds later it can be done, as opposed to, oh, I want to do this, and then you have to shift to your right brain thing to grab a couple cables and go sit in front of a patch bay and try and figure out what, and you just don't do those things. Because you can take all of the analog devices you have in your studio and you have instant access to them, and you just basically click on something in your software and it's done. This product was an interesting journey because my background is all software, so I like to learn how you go about building hardware. I made this box and I wanted to go show it to people, and so somebody connected me to Paul. They said, hey, go to Nashville. Paul Wolff will show you around to some studios, and he was a larger than life guy. What immediately got my attention is that Paul had the same pick and place machine that we had, which is the thing that puts all the parts on the board. So that was interesting. And then the other thing that caught my attention is that he was making these giant analog mixing consoles entirely by himself in one bay of his garage.
I was doing this stuff in my house, in a garage, where I was building consoles. I had a pick and place machine.
So met Paul and he took me to some fun studios in Nashville where I showed this patch bay that I was working on. And so we started talking a bunch after I was there the first time, because he'd had a couple years of experience building all of that stuff and we were just learning how to do it. We knew we would have to go out and try and figure out how to market and get the world to know we even existed. In my mind, I'm thinking Paul's gonna have to do the same thing, and then I realized, no, he actually is already a known entity in the market. But I just said, hey, what's your plan? I'm building a manufacturing facility. We want to build all kinds of cool analog stuff, but we want to be able to bring the digital control and all the digital stuff we've learned to that analog stuff. Do you have any interest in trying to just merge these two things together? That's how I got connected to Paul.
Well, you know, it's funny because my dad always said if you got a good education, you wouldn't work in a factory, and now we own one. We make consoles, we make patch bays, we make mic pre's, EQs, compressors. We make our own circuit boards, we have a metal shop, we have a wood shop. The thing that Jared and I both have in common is good ideas are based on frustration. And you come up with something because you tried something and it was just one roadblock after another. So you try to create shortcuts and to make the flow easier. Because the whole idea in any art is flow. If you interrupt that flow, everything just stops.
When you go into a studio and everything is all set up and you can focus entirely on the creative stuff and not have to flip-flop back and forth between pure creativity in the right side of your brain to messing with the technology in the left side of your brain, that's just staying in the flow. Paul and I share the same thing, which is that in all of these things that you're building stuff intending to try to keep people in the creative space and in the flow always, that you don't do things that ever take somebody out of that. And so that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. When you sell something to somebody and it breaks, they're totally out of the flow. So in all of the stuff that Paul designs, one of the things that he's really focuses on is how do I make this stuff like super reliable? Because I don't ever want my equipment to be the thing that causes somebody to get knocked out of the flow.
I've made records in the past. I've owned studios and done this whole thing. And I just see the things that get in the way. And I try to eliminate those things from the process. So you look at something is right where it's supposed to be, you push a button, it does what it's supposed to do. You don't have to worry about maintenance. You don't have to worry about something breaking. So you want to be able to have somebody in a room with a mood. They feel they're singing a song that's the song of their life. And you want to make sure that you can capture it without going, okay, hang on one second. Let me just hold on one second. Just hang on a second. You're patching things, the things are popping in their earphones, and you're just killing it. And not the good killing it, the bad killing it.
And if you mention something like that to him, you're going to get the story that I've heard like 20 times about somebody who came in and they were just killing it.
The good killing it.
And the mic pre-channel fizzled out, and in the 5 minutes that they went to try and fix it, vibe is gone.
Long time ago, a mic pre failed during a recording of a vocalist that was just unbelievable. And the guy turned around and he said, well, that's a groove buster. You could see the inspiration just vanish. She had to come in like the next day to redo the vocal. It just killed her because she was in the zone, and all of a sudden the thing started making noise. And so those are the types of things that you have in the back of your mind that you try to eliminate.
The whole point of this is actually to do creative stuff with it. So you just have to keep people in that creative as much as possible.
That's kind of where the ideas come from. They come from ideas, but they also come from trying to make your life easier, make the process smoother. But you also have to be involved in that industry to understand what they're attempting to do. You have that ability to learn from them what they need at the very early levels of what's going on. I've done sound with a lot of different bands. The most recent thing probably is Jim Messina, and that was the last record I did. We did 3 years ago. And I learned a lot from him, just working with him in the studio. You know, that's where it all comes from. It just comes from experience. I think we're in a really good position because both of us are like that. Everybody here is into this business to some degree. Nick, who builds our stuff, he repairs synthesizers for people. Everybody here has something that they've done and love in this business.
Everybody knows Paul. It's kind of crazy. After the AES show, I realized that as well because I talked to some other people and talking about, you know, how do we position Wolff and what's Wolff going to do? One of the people we were talking to said, well, the way you position yourself is you've got the last living console designer that designed consoles over this last like 40 years.
When you make a record, you want to walk into a place, you want to feel like you can make a record there, first of all. And there's just something about a console sitting there that gives you a feeling like work is being done.
Consoles are some of the sexiest things. When you walk up and you see a giant console, right? So
you have this console sitting there and you know that things are ready to go. Meters are moving, lights are blinking, you can see where everything is. You can grab two things at once, and there's a flow that happens that still is just faster on a console. Something that I realized when I did Jimmy Messina's last live record, we were given a collection of microphones, and so all the mics on the stage were theirs. And I noticed when I would pull something out of the house to get rid of a certain tone, it kind of fixed it in all of them. And I started thinking, wow, this is real interesting. And then I started thinking about the fact that the console we were using, they were all the same mic pre's. And then if you look back, all the great records that were done on consoles, it doesn't matter what console they were, everything was that brand. So all those anomalies, the phase shifts and the distortions and stuff like that were all kind of in sync. So there was a glue that added. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to come out with an inline mic pre that's built into the console, just to offer somebody 16 of the same things. The overall acoustics of the band, it sounds more gelled when it's coming from one thing. That's where engineers that get familiar with a particular console will stick with that console their whole career. They know exactly how to get that sound quickly, not interrupting the flow, not being a groove buster. My experience obviously goes back to the 70s and 80s. I didn't want to copy what I had done before. But you have something that set a standard in the industry as far as how consoles went, so you have to recreate that a different way. And I think I did. So I came up with this. So you can monitor all 4 buses. Then you have 4 external inputs. You also have a Bluetooth input. So when someone comes in with their phone and they say, hey, I've got this song that I just did, I want to listen to it. You pair it up and you hit it and you monitor it. And then you can have somebody actually sing to it right away, hold 2 buttons down and monitor both at the same time, which is important. Nobody else can do that either. You can also talk to 8 cues from this. So you can talk to your, especially like the Me More, you can go into each one individually and talk to each person individually if you want.
The role of the Me More, it's hard to overstate how important this is. The studios like Blackbird, Ocean Way, here, wanted an analog cue system. Paul and I have had a history together. I know what his stuff sounds like. I know that he's not going to put out anything that, in his terminology, doesn't kick ass.
Our customers are our friends. All these guys that I've sold consoles to in the past, done design work for people, they're all our friends. And they tell us things honestly. And when you get into those kind of relationships, they tell you what they really need, what really gets in the way. And then you take that, and as long as you're able to do those things quickly, then you can get ahead of the game. And that, to me, is the key. Everybody eventually gets the same information, but it's how quickly you can get to it. And then you become the standard. It's like with the Me More, that's now become a standard for headphone monitoring. And that's your ultimate goal, is you want to make something that's so good, everybody loves it, and everybody asks for it. And then there's a consistency. The creativity, and you're doing studios a favor by giving something that helps them. If the times change, you have to adapt to it, because it's going to change and it's going to move on. And if you don't grab it and move with it, you're done. If I need to add a feature, if there's a new thing that comes along, like the DAW loop, inline monitoring, we didn't have that on this module. And one of our customers said, it'd be really nice if you did. And I looked at it and I thought, this could be done. So I added it to the existing module and we did an upgrade.
We will always have a super close connection back to all of the customers and the people that use this stuff.
One of the things that we do have that people like about us is I'm still fixing things that I made 40 years ago because the people trust me. They call me up. I have the same phone number.
It's pretty funny. I've been working in someone's studio with Paul doing an installation on stuff, and he gets a phone call and he's like, "Who's this?" And he answers, "Hello?" And it's some customer, quite literally, that he sold something to 25 years ago, and he put everything down and spent the next 15 minutes talking through fixing it when he hung up. I'm like, that's pretty funny. He's like, "Hey, I will always help anybody that I've sold anything to." So that's the commitment that we'll have around all the Wolff stuff.
Even though it's a new company, I still do that for them. And what happens in 2 years, they decide, what, I want to expand, and they call me up and they want to buy a console. I've always designed things with one thing in mind, is I don't want them back. So I put protections on the inputs. Like this console, every switch goes to a relay. There's no audio going through any switch. I don't want to replace switches. I don't want to get it back. I don't have modules being sent back from my customers. They just call up and ask questions about how to do something. Responsiveness and service, that's the key to it.
Paul is a guy who has now a legacy over, he doesn't want to think about how many decades, but a lot of decades designing consoles and analog equipment. Not only has Paul designed all of this stuff, but because he knows everybody, he also knows what is in everybody else's products. So he just knows all the circuits. Because the whole point of making this stuff is to help creatives do creative things. We need to run a business and we need it to be successful, but at the same time, that's not just monetary, that's actually making sure that you got super happy people that are doing the creative things that they want to do, which is why they bought your stuff in the first place.
Trust is something that is reliable, something that doesn't let you down. Trust is a relationship with a person or a piece of equipment or a process that will always do the right thing for you. And trust is something that you have to build in along with quality, along with your vision.